This is Ask Todd on the Financial Exchange Radio Network. If you have an existing estate plan or are in the market for one, Todd Lutsky is here to answer your questions and help you plan for later life. Ask Todd is presented by Cushing & Dolan, serving Massachusetts and New England for more than 35 years, helping families with estate and tax planning, Medicaid planning, and probate law. Visit CushingDolan.com. Now, here's Todd Lutsky.
We are now joined by the one and only Todd Lutsky from the law firm of Cushing & Dolan. Phone lines are open because the segment is Ask Todd, where you get to ask Todd your estate planning questions live on air right now. 888-205-2263. That is the number to call to ask Todd your estate planning questions. We usually have time for 2 to 3 of these, so get calling early, get calling often to make sure you get your question answered by Todd. That number is 888-205-2263. Again, that number is 888-205-2263, and we do have limited space on the phone lines, so get calling now. Mr. Lutsky, how are you doing today?
I am never better. And you?
I'm okay-ish.
Just okay-ish?
Well, had a doctor's appointment yesterday.
Yeah, how'd that go?
Doctor asked why I drank the brake fluid.
Brake fluid?
Told him I couldn't stop.
That would make sense.
Yeah, wasn't a good appointment.
Wasn't a good appointment.
Todd, I want to talk to you a little bit about nursing home planning and being able to qualify for Medicaid. When you look at how Medicaid examines assets and incomes of a family,
Yeah.
what do they look at in order to determine eligibility?
So it's a little different for a single person versus a married couple.
Let's start with a single person then.
So the single person is a little easier because pretty much everything is countable. Let's start with that. But then let's try to back off assets. So you got this big pile. In order for an individual to become eligible for Medicaid, you need to have $2,000. That doesn't seem like a lot of money.
Mm-hmm. No.
So, however, if you have a house, it's your primary residence, and most people do, they can check a box on the application that they intend to return home. And as long as the value of that home is less than about $1,033,000, it varies right around there, goes up and down. And it was your primary residence, and it's located in Massachusetts, if you're applying in Mass, it'll be non-countable. Yeah, but lienable.
Okay.
So they're going to put a lien on it, but at least that won't prevent you from, it won't count towards your $2,000 limit. All the rest of the money, if you have no other real estate, all the rest of the money is countable. How do I get rid of it? Well, I can't give it away. It's too late. You got a 5-year waiting period. So the only thing you could do there is think about buying a Medicaid annuity if you need one, right? To take those dollars. It's a special annuity. You can't do this on your own. And you follow the annuity rules that do provide a payback to the state in case the annuity doesn't expire by the time you do. You convert those assets into an income stream. So if I had $502,000 of assets, I would have to take $500, leaving the $2, buy the annuity for $500, pays out over my life expectancy based on a table, and then I get this stream of income. Well, that income goes to the nursing home, but the $500,000 went away. Now it looks like I'm worth $2,000. I'm immediately eligible for Medicaid, provided, however, that it does have a payback provision in case I die.
Talking with Todd Lutsky from Cushing & Dolan. If you've got a question to ask Todd about your estate plan, phone lines still have space on them at 888-205-2263. That number again is 888-205-2263. 2263. Todd, what about the situation for a married couple? How does that differ?
Yeah, so take the same situation. I haven't discussed rental property or vacation homes. I'm just assuming a home and money. Those are the two assets,
okay.
which is mostly what people have.
Sure.
And so with a married couple, it's a little different, right? It's actually a little easier because with a married couple, you have, again, everything starts off as countable, but the home is different. The home, if the community spouse is living there and it's located in Massachusetts, there is no value limitation. Remember, we talked about the value limitation for the single person. Remember, if that home that the single person had was worth $1.5 million, hard stop. They're not eligible for Medicaid. That's a toughie. However, for a married couple, if your primary residence is worth $1.5 million or $2 million or whatever it is, doesn't matter. As long as this community spouse is living there, non-countable, non-lienable. What I would recommend, though, is that you take the jointly owned property and convey it to the healthy spouse. Don't leave it owned jointly, because if I leave it owned jointly, it's possibly going to be, I could die out of order, and then it goes back to the surviving, the sick spouse who's in the nursing home. All the rest of the money, same deal. It's all at risk, except the community spouse gets about $154,000, give or take, of money that she can reach in and take out of that pot of money, and that'll be non-countable along with the house. Everything else, countable, unless you transfer it to the healthy spouse, which you can do because that's a permissible transfer, no 5-year waiting period, and then the healthy spouse buys that same annuity that we talked about for the single person, and like magic, you're on Medicaid.
Talking with Todd Lutsky from Cushing and Dolan. If you've got a question for Todd, we do still have room on the phone lines at 888-205-2263. We are going to take a quick break right now, but when we come back, we're going to get to your questions with Todd. That phone number is 888-205-2263. One last time, it's 888-205-2263.
Ask Todd with Todd Lutsky every Wednesday at 10:30, only here on the Financial Exchange Radio Network. You're listening to Ask Todd with Todd Lutsky on the Financial Exchange Radio Network.
Talking with Todd Lutsky from the law firm of Cushing and Dolan. Todd, we talked about the assets that are potentially at risk and income streams that are potentially at risk in the event that you have a long-term care situation.
Yeah.
Given all of that money that could be at risk, at what age does someone need to start getting their estate plan in order for potential long-term care situations?
I would say, I just as a general rule, I say, 60 and over, if they come in and they are talking about doing long-term care planning, I would say, 60 and over is a time in which I'm going to at least ask the question, because, it takes 5 years to protect stuff. And I know we've been talking about last minute planning a minute ago, but if you want to avoid that problem, it does take 5 years. So, if I can have this in my rearview mirror by the time I'm 65 or 70, why not?
Is there downside to doing it sooner than that? Let's say that you're 55 and you say, hey, should I start getting, things in order for potential long-term care situations? Is there a problem with going that route?
Well, I mean, when you're younger, you probably have younger children. You might not want them serving as trustee yet. You might need more access to the assets to pay for college, or mortgages exist on houses. So yeah, there can be some issues when you're younger that you might just not be ready for that irrevocable trust. You haven't quite settled down yet. So
let's go forward now. Let's say that someone is approaching a nursing home situation where, their health is failing, spouse can't keep them at home, or maybe they're just not, maybe they don't have a spouse. How does qualifying for Medicaid to cover the cost of that nursing home actually work? Like, what are the steps that are involved in being able to say, I'm going to have Medicaid cover the cost of this long-term care situation?
So this is more back to that last-minute idea, right? If you've not planned, if you have planned, there's always going to be some assets that are sort of kicking around that you have to deal with. And so the process itself is pretty arduous. I mean, you basically come in, you explain how all the assets are owned. You decide what assets are countable, what assets are not. Like a house we talked about might not be countable. Perhaps a rental property is not countable if it's making money, if it's generating income essential to self-support, but lienable. So you have to rearrange all the assets to find out what's countable and what's non-countable. Once you do that and you've met the financial requirements of eligibility, again, for a married couple, that would be $154,000-ish for the healthy spouse, $2,000 for the sick spouse, and one home. So when you meet that eligibility requirement, now you can begin the application process. But the application process is going to require, 5 years worth of bank statements, 5 years worth of brokerage statements, birth certificates, social security card, 3 years worth of tax returns, on and on. I mean, there's a list.
So it's not a simple and easy process, is what you're telling me.
No, not at, in fact, we do it all, but you got to help me help you by providing that support for everything I put on the application. Then you file. Then you wait 30 days for them to sniff it over and come back and say, you know what? We need more stuff. And then you have 30 days to get that more stuff. Mm-hmm. And then you wait another 30 days, and if all has gone well, you should get a letter of eligibility, retroactive back to the day we said you were financially eligible, or the day we proved that you were financially eligible for Medicaid. So it's a process, but it's one worth going down that road if you can save these assets. So, folks, we're talking now a little bit about what to do last minute. We just talked about the application process itself, which is time-consuming and a little arduous, but again, the lawyers do most of the work. However, what do we do last minute to make sure these assets aren't taken? And that's what this guide is all about. Whether you're married or single, the rules are different, right? So how you treat assets that are countable, non-countable, think about a home, a vacation home, a rental property. What about life insurance? What about annuities, 401ks? They're all treated differently, and there's even some information in here about how you can transfer some of these assets last minute without the 5-year waiting period. So don't just write the check, folks. Call and get the guide. Last minute Medicaid eligibility techniques to save it. And it's for people who have planned and people who have not planned. 866-848-5699 or legalexchangeshow.com. Again, 866-848-5699 or legalexchangeshow.com.
Todd, as you're trying to navigate that situation, and let's say that again you've got a Medicaid situation or a nursing home situation rather that you're trying to qualify for Medicaid on. Are there any differences from state to state in how that works in terms of qualifying, or is it largely the same between most states, depending on where people are listening right now?
I'm going to say that largely it's the same because it's a federal statute that is implemented by the state, but they are not all the same, right? Like, for example, in Massachusetts, the value of a home, when we talked about a single person, the value of the home was when the state passed the Medicaid laws in 2006, they said a home will be considered non-countable unless the value exceeds $750,000 or $500,000, depending on where you live, right? Because certain states have higher value real estate than others. So they put that option in there, and the state got to pick which value they used. And of course, those were indexed for inflation. So that's why we're at $1 million plus in Massachusetts today. So Massachusetts opted for the 750 valuation, whereas many other states that didn't opt for that, 500 was enough to make it non-countable because most of the values of the real estate in that state were lower, and so that would be a difference. But generally the rules are pretty uniform.
Todd, I know that with the latest reconciliation bill that just passed Congress and was signed by the president, there are some changes to Medicaid that happen as we go out a couple of years from now. Do any of those impact Medicaid coverage of nursing home costs?
Yeah, the good news is not really, except interestingly enough, this valuation on the home thing, right? They've now decided to make it uniform and make the value $1 million on the house going forward.
Across the board.
I'm still digesting the bill as we speak, but it appears to me that it's going to be across the board. The thing I'm waiting on is it going to remain indexed for inflation? And then the question is,
Sure.
if you're already at $1.1 million like we are in Mass, is it going to fall back to $1 million, or do we stay at $1.1 million and go forward? These are some things that we need to work out. But nevertheless, folks, that's what I have for today.
Mr. Lutsky, thank you so much for joining us.
Always a pleasure.
This has been Ask Todd on the Financial Exchange Radio Network. Ask Todd with Todd Lutsky has been presented by Cushing & Dolan, serving Massachusetts and New England for more than 30 years, helping families with estate and tax planning, Medicaid planning, and probate law. Call 800-393-4001 or visit CushingDolan.com. The views expressed in this segment are solely those of Cushing & Dolan. Armstrong Advisory does not provide any legal or tax advice. Please consult with your legal or tax advisor on such matters. Cushing and Armstrong do not endorse each other and are not affiliated.